Hey,
Ladies and gentlemen, we're very, very happy to invite or to have Matt Kibbe and Terry Kibbe join us tonight for the Montana Meetup. And again, we're very happy to have them. Go ahead, Matt, tell us what you're all about.
so it's actually good to be back. Terry and I were trying to remember the last meeting. I believe we were at the state convention in 2021, and back then it was unusually beautiful to actually gather in person with people because we were still dealing with sort of lockdown authoritarianism. And as I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, my talk that night was definitely ranting and raving about the loss of liberties and irrationality and the humanitarian disaster that was the government response to COVID. And I'm
And
going to keep
things
ranting.
really haven't changed, let's be honest.
No, well, things I've if anything, I've gotten more insufferable, and Terry can speak to that. But this is an issue that I think is definitive for libertarians, for people that love liberty, and just people that love people and the ability to leave your home, to work, to make choices for yourself about what you put in your body. I always thought these were like fundamentally American things, but now we debate all these things, and I'll get into this more. But Terry wants to complain about me first.
Well, before I complain, if any of you all don't know who Matt and I are, we co-founded and run together a group called Free the People. And we use video storytelling and documentaries to teach people about liberty. It's pretty simple. We like to entertain people before we can educate them. Turns out that if you're interesting, people will actually pay attention instead of reading another 20-page white paper published by any number of think tanks here in DC. So the latest project that we're doing, our big project right now, is called The Cover Up. And this is the culmination of 4 years now of Matt ranting and raving about the government reactions to COVID, starting with our vacation that we're having in March of 2020 as the world was shutting down. We were on a beach in the Virgin Islands, and everyone else is enjoying cocktails, and Matt's online bitching about supply chains and government shutdowns and what this is going to mean to humanity, and typing out articles. And it really hasn't stopped. He's been almost 100% focused on COVID and government's reactions. And so finally, we were able to channel all of this rage and ranting into something besides me. And we started this docuseries called The Cover Up. And it's based on a couple of different conversations that Matt and I had with Senator Rand Paul in 22, talking about how the cover up is so much deeper than people think. And as we've dug into it more and more, we realize that it's not just Fauci. Like Fauci and the NIAID is actually part of the military industrial complex, and they're really getting their marching orders from them. So we've started doing a series of interviews with the best and the brightest and interesting people that have been fighting this fight since the very beginning. People like Dr. Jay Bhattacharya, the amazing epidemiologist from Stanford, who was one of the first people to come out very strongly about this, was one of the first signers of the Great Barrington Declaration. And as a result, he was tormented and threatened by the government and shut down and canceled and all of that you can do. So Jay is the subject of our first interview and our first episode that we released at the end of May. And the next episode will come out hopefully at the end of this month if everybody gets their act together, starring Rand Paul. And then we've got Dr. Scott Atlas as the third. And then we're going to be interviewing people like Matt Ridley from London,
Richard E. Bright, Thomas Massey, and there's a group of citizen activists on X, Twitter at the time, called Drastic, and I forget what the acronym stands for, but all of these revelations about gain of function and the ties to the military industrial complex come from not from professionals, not from think tanks, not from politicians, but people that actually had the skills and the sort of passion for getting at the truth Um, Everything we know today is because of just people that know how to go deep into the internet and find documents that fairly dumb government officials don't know how to bury. Because unlike the old days, and I'll do a ramble tangent here, there was this thing called the Church Committee that exposed a lot of these insane, unethical, and downright evil things that the intelligence community, the defense community, whatever you call that blob of big government agencies with a god complex, they were doing all of these kinds of crazy experiments like MK Ultra, all of that. But we don't know exactly what they did back then because a lot of that was on paper, and a lot of those papers were destroyed in preparation for stopping the Church Committee from exposing them. Turns out the internet's a little bit different, and digital files never go away. And these guys from Drastic have dug up some amazing things that we're going to be talking about on this series. But I want to use my favorite prop, because I think it's a
He's so proud of this.
This is my Anthony Fauci prayer candle. And I say that with all due reverence, but when Anthony Fauci so arrogantly was saying, "I am the science," what he was really saying was that the public science, the science that he represents, the cartel of interests and taxpayer money that he controls, it's more of a god complex. It's more of a religion than it is anything resembling science that I think everyone here would deeply respect and appreciate the scientific process for what it does, to discover new solutions to problems, and the competition between big brains trying to figure things out, the arguments, the ups and the downs, and all of that. That is a scientific process. It's exactly like the market process that we all love so much, because it doesn't assume that anybody's smart enough to decide for us. We have to work through it and try to figure things out. That's what markets are, just people cooperating, trying to figure stuff out. Well, it turns out the scientific process is the same thing. But if you are Anthony Fauci and you're that important, you know that you know better than everybody else. And there's sort of a hubris to that, a scientism, as Frederick Hayek might call it, a fatal conceit, that when you eliminate the process and give all the power to a handful of people, well, we know what happens. That's central planning. We know what happens. A lot of people inevitably die either on purpose or by accident, but this is so much of what we fight for. And in this process, when I was first writing about lockdowns on that beach in March of 2020, I was thinking about it as an economist. I was thinking that surely these people that are staying, do you guys remember the hashtag stay the fuck home? And I took them literally. And I said to myself,
until that time you drove to Iowa to get a beer because you were so tired of
I didn't obey, but I took them at their word that they actually thought that this was a good idea to force everybody to stay home. Well, of course, if you did that, in very short order, people would start dying, because there'd be no water, there'd be no food, there'd be no electricity. The entire supply chain would collapse, and particularly people at the margins would be the first to suffer the dire consequences of this arrogant, fatal conceit. But as I dig and trying to really comprehend the sheer stupidity of what happened in 2020 and 2021, that's when I started going deep down the rabbit hole and trying to figure out, we all had to become amateur epidemiologists. This is not something that I want to do. I don't know about you guys, but I needed to understand all of these arguments, because these bureaucrats, Fauci is the best at this. He talks in circular logic, using a lot of acronyms and words that normal folks have no idea what he's talking about. Well, it turns out, once you dig just a little bit into it, that it's all bullshit, and that it's not based on science at all. He's not a scientist. He's an apparatchik, and his power came. And this is something that the first episode of this series, The Cover Up, this is what I learned on my show Kibbe on Liberty, when I was first talking to Jay Bhattacharya, who is not only a a very successful published epidemiologist based at Stanford University of Medicine. He's also a PhD economist who is basically an Austrian. He's a Hayekian economist. I joke that the Venn diagram between successful epidemiologists and Hayekian economists is one guy. That's all there is, and it's Jay. And I think that's part of how he had the insights to question all this. But he said to me that, sort of an offhanded comment, that Anthony Fauci got all of his power after the anthrax scare in 2001. And it was part of the war on terror. Dick Cheney and this guy, Joe Biden, I don't know if you remember him, Senate Intelligence Committee, they were obsessed with bioterrorism. And they saw an opportunity with 9/11 and with the anthrax scare to radically expand the military industrial complex's footprint in bioterrorism research. And Fauci, being the bureaucrat that he was, by the way, this is mostly true, but it's also the model that I'm hoping to demonstrate beyond a reasonable doubt in this series. I know it's true, but I'm going to prove it in this series. Fauci was the bureaucrat that said, I'll do that. I have this idea. We're going to map out every potential pathogen, and we're going to go into the bat caves, and we're going to harvest all of those deadly viruses. We're going to take them back to the lab, and we're going to manipulate them. We're going to turn them into super viruses through gain-of-function research, and we're going to map it all out. Every plausible mutation of all of these viruses, and then we're kind of come up with a cure. Now, to me, on its face, that sounds insane. It sounds wildly dangerous, but even the hubris of thinking that you could possibly imagine the behavior of viruses that are fairly unpredictable, and then the behavior of viruses that you've turned into monstrous gain-of-function things that literally have the potential to wipe out humanity. This is not just bureaucratic hubris. This is not just power and money. We're going to document the power and the money, but it's also what, as I mentioned earlier, what Hayek would call a fatal conceit. But in this case, literal fatal conceit. Fauci wrote this piece with the now infamous David Morans, who, for those of you who are following this very closely, he was testifying before a House committee a couple of weeks ago, and the emails that were FOIA'd from him show that he was actively trying to destroy evidence that was under FOIA, actively hiding information from Congress. He sort of preemptively threw Fauci under the bus, and he's like, I do this for Anthony. He's my guy. He's Anthony Fauci's consigliere. He and Fauci wrote a piece in 2021 where they talk about this dystopian vision for the future. It's kind of a technocratic, authoritarian socialism kind of thing, where they're going to change the way you live, they're going to change the way you travel, they're going to change the way you eat, and to quote them, they're going to bend modernity to make the world a centrally planned but much safer place. So this isn't just bureaucrats gone wild. It's to me like the new threat to civil society, certainly in the United States, because these scientists really believe that they're so much smarter than you that they can reorganize things from the top down.
And I think people forget too that Fauci's mismanagement of major diseases goes all the way back to the HIV/AIDS crisis. At the time, I think he thought that you could get it just from close contact with someone. So he was having people like afraid to touch someone that was a homosexual. I mean,
he was doing social distancing.
Social distancing, even back then. Are you done for now ranting? Can I talk about the specifics of the cover-up series?
Did I go down a rabbit hole?
Yes.
Yes.
But at least it wasn't just to me.
Look,
welcome
it happens.
to my life.
It happens.
So we're really excited because most of the times when we have these great projects, we at least re-release them all on social media, which is a great way to reach people. But for this project, Blaze TV has been as equally focused on COVID and cover up and government's mismanagement of everything, that they actually picked up distribution of this series. So we're really, really excited about that. I'm going to post in a link here in the chat. If I can do this, where you can go and check out the trailer for it. And I'm going to post something else in here too, just some notes. And then I'm going to actually reach out. We have a trailer for episode 2 with Rand Paul that hasn't been released yet. And I'm going to share that with you guys here too, if you would like to watch it as well. And then you can go back, and I'm going to try to find this.
So there was just a hearing a couple
yesterday.
Was it yesterday?
It was yesterday.
Yeah. So an update on what's actually happening. Rand Paul has, you guys have all seen him take down Fauci in hearings over the last couple of years, and Fauci really losing his composure. How dare you question me? Don't you know I'm the science kind of reaction to this? He has finally convinced the chairman, the Senate chairman of the Homeland Security Committee, which is basically an oversight committee, not just for Homeland Security, but for all of these government operations. They are allowing the first actual investigative hearing on the origins of COVID. And I attended that hearing, and I got to say that the chairman was, I mean, he was biased because for reasons, well, I can explain them, but it sort of defies reasonableness that the Democrats have been lockstep opposed to even asking questions about the origins of COVID. By the way, Mitt Romney batted for the other team. I know you guys are shocked, but he was at this hearing as well. And he actually said, why does it matter if this was a natural virus or a government-funded, government-created virus? He didn't say it exactly that way, but he said it doesn't matter. And one of the themes of this whole hearing from the side of people that are defending Fauci and continue to this day the claim that the government had no hand in creating this virus, their logic goes like this. This was a natural occurring event, but to ensure that it never happens again, we need a lot more government funding and power to regulate gain-of-function research. That didn't happen, but if it does happen, we need to stop it, and we need lots of more money and power to do it. That was their argument, and sort of Mitt Romney weighed in on that and said, I don't know if this is gain-of-function research, but we definitely need to regulate gain-of-function research in case this happens again, even if it didn't happen. So my mind is a little bit stupider having attended a Senate hearing yesterday. So I apologize for that.
But you looked good on camera. He ended up sitting right behind the witnesses, so he was on screen the whole day, which led to us getting a text from a friend that we hadn't talked to since 2017.
Yeah,
which was kind of weird.
So a final thought on this, and more on production, and this kind of gets to what we try to do at Free the People. I can go down the economic rabbit hole, the philosophical rabbit hole. Unfortunately, I'm becoming competent in the science of gain of function, which is not something I ever aspired to do. But what we wanted to do with this series was more inspired by two cultural phenomenon that we think is perhaps more appealing to turn people onto this. One, Terry and I were watching, we were late to the game, but we were watching the first season of Stranger Things. I don't know, has anyone watched Stranger Things? Anybody? So no one gets the cultural reference. It's a sci-fi about, tell me if this sounds familiar, about a shadowy American national security military agency doing wildly risky science experiments to stop the Soviet threat. And in the process of doing that, they unleash hell on earth. And I'm watching this, I'm like, this sounds familiar. I think there might be a story here. So the vibe of the cover up is very much inspired by Stranger Things, a wildly successful sci-fi series, but it's also kind of a true crime thing. Perhaps the most popular genre in podcasts, because we wanted to take very dense material and translate it into something that people could get into. They could get into the story, and so there's a lot of whodunit. There's a little bit of science. There's a little bit of economics, but generally speaking, I want people to participate in this process. I want them to actually tell me, you're talking to the wrong guy. You need to talk to that guy. Inspired by this crowd sourced research organization called Drastic, we're hoping that the truth can come from people who are not part of any organized institution or political party or anything else, because I don't think that the system is going to solve this problem. I think we have to do it from the outside. And with that, I will shut up, and we can talk about this. We can talk about other things. Is there anything you want to talk about?
Oh, I just want to thank Liam for signing up for the email about cover up. So
Yeah.
he sees what's going on.
Thank you, Liam.
Nope, I'm gonna just post again just a copy of the logo for the cover up so you can kind of see the vibe. But we've been talking for way too long.
One final, like,
really,
it's not the thing. We cut a deal with the Blaze because.
Go ahead.
What?
Go ahead. Well, go ahead. This is a public.
I know.
Okay, go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
The idea is that we're going to distribute through the Blaze because it's a massive channel, and it is that they have a huge marketing department, at least compared to Little Old Free the People. But eventually, these episodes will be available to the public, which is, of course, part of our interest, because I don't want to just turn on one segment of the political spectrum or one side versus the other. I want to reach everybody. So if you're too cheap to sign up for the Blaze, stay tuned. Eventually you'll get to see it anyway. That's all.
All right. Any questions, comments, whatever you guys want to talk about now?
Well, I did look up that Stranger Things is on Netflix, so that's a nice thing. Also, I wanted to ask you,
great show.
With that candle, if you pray to that candle, can you hit the lottery?
I think I mean, you definitely don't get natural immunity from this, but you get boosted. That's for sure.
I do have a question for you. And something you'd said earlier about Jay Bhattacharya already being an Austrian. I understand that that's a one person, where the circles go over each other. Yeah. But as far as mentality in the future, so like these epidemiologists and other scientists that are honest and good people, but haven't yet heard of the Austrian school of thought, do you think that there's a lot of potential there? Like they're just going to be naturally like real amicable to that, the logic of it?
I do think like this is a classic example of what Hayek would call scientism. And I think when you see this form of central planning and the kind of hubris and insanity that it creates, I think, and Jay will help with this, because Jay has become a hero to any of these dissidents that question the public narrative. And, a lot of them are just scientists who said to themselves, this sounds insanely dangerous, we shouldn't do it, which would be a common sense approach to it. But I think, and this is why I want to talk to Matt Ridley, the famous scholar of innovation from the UK. I want people to appreciate that centralized science is just as dangerous as centralized anything. If anything, it's more dangerous because of the humanitarian implications. So for me, this is a teachable moment to show that that science itself needs to be free and decentralized in order to do the things that we hope that science can accomplish. And I had the director of White Coat Waste. I don't know if anybody knows this organization's, but it's an interesting confluence of events because they are an animal rights organization that doesn't like the government funding animal research.
That's pretty much their whole mission, is to uncover horrific government paid research on animals.
Yeah, in fact, I don't know if everyone in this group knows, but White Coat Waste found a research facility in Hamilton that was doing this
Right.
COVID stuff on bats. So that's there in the Bitterroot Valley. So
Oh,
that's
wow.
how I found out about it, was through them.
Yeah.
I actually
Yeah.
just got done working on that lab. I just got laid off from doing their expansion. And
Oh,
it
wow.
is true. Everything we built down there is an expansion for bat testing. And they test on holler monkeys as well.
Yep. Yeah, it's Rocky Mountain Labs. I mean, it's I heard that episode that you guys had that
Yeah.
fella on. And
Yeah.
I'd recommend it, yeah.
But
Well, I
there's
looked-
like, go ahead.
Oh, one other thing I found out that was interesting is when they did the ribbon cutting for it, all the money for that lab, I guess that facility was actually about to, I don't know if it's going to go down in ranking from a biohazard level 4 back to a 3. But during the COVID, when they started printing more money, that literally is what funded the lab expansion. The $125 million came strictly from the COVID stimulus bill. And they talked very happily about it.
So like there is this sort of, I mean, the happy accident is they were going after animal research, and particularly not beagle torture. You've probably seen that, you know, Fauci is the evil Lord King of torturing helpless beagles. They were actually torturing cats.
Yeah.
And white coat wastes. By the way, cats are libertarians and dogs are communists, but that's a conversation for a different live stream. But they were trying to stop cat testing, and it was those FOIA requests where they discovered the Wuhan lab, which is actually an animal testing lab, and they fed that information to very few people would listen at the time, but they fed that to certain news outlets that would actually publish it, and that was one of the cascading effects. You know, the scary thing to me is that Fauci basically controls all medical research, and government is by far the largest funder of medical research. And this goes back not to something that the Democrats did. It actually was something that Newt Gingrich did, because he thought that science was the one thing, like the white hat project, that government should fund, because everybody agrees that we should have more science. And then by 2001, it morphed into this monstrous thing. But it is, I completely lost my thought. What was I talking about?
I don't know. I'm responding to the fact that the dog is an anarchist.
Oh, we're talking about was I talking about cat research? I don't know.
Yes.
Ignore what I was saying.
Well, the cat research I ran across, and I only saw a little slim piece of it, but it's not just cat research. It goes down to kittens. And,
Right.
Yeah. And that was pretty disgusting.
Yeah, and in fact, the guy from White Coat Waste that Matt had on his show actually rescued one of the kittens or cats, and he has the tattoo in his ear with his serial number from the research.
I picked up the thread thanks to your comment, and this goes way back. But you know, we all sort of, not us libertarians are always skeptical of government power, but this reasonable logic that the government should be involved in medical research and scientific research. In the case of animal testing, it is not something that in any case that we know of actually makes market sense. There is no ROI that says we're going to torture kittens and beagles and produce a marketable medical discovery. But when the government is showering money on all of these academic institutions and research facilities, they'll do anything because it's cash flow, and they lose their ethical standards along the way. But I very much believe that decentralized science is far more self-governing, and even market price systems are much better safeguards against some of these mad science experiments, because as Richard Ebright, I don't know if anybody watched this hearing, but Richard Ebright is also someone we're going to have on our show. He pointed out that there is no commercial, medical, or scientific value to gain of function research. So you're only doing it because you have this endless flow of government money, and you want to go back to them and say, I have this plan that's going to keep us safe, even though it keeps us wildly unsafe. So like there is a libertarian opportunity here to teach people about decentralized systems and governing institutions that would never do the kind of insane things that our government is doing to us.
Well, speaking of the endless flow of money, I'll give you another rabbit hole to jump down. In preparation for tonight's show, I watched one of your old shows, but actually wasn't that old a show, with Christopher Cohen and Abigail Hall, How to Run Wars. Endless wars are a wonderful source of money, or constant money.
Yeah, that's Matt's most recent Kibbe on Liberty that just came out today.
Yeah.
For those of you who don't know, Christopher Coyne and Abigail Hall are both products of George Mason University's Austrian Economics Department.
Right.
And their research paradigm is all about war propaganda, incentives for basically neocon incentives to constantly have war to sort of feed the war machine. And I talked to them a little bit on camera, but mostly off camera, about my research on the pandemic industrial complex. And since I'm doing Venn diagrams tonight, the military industrial complex that they talk about and the pandemic industrial complex, it's almost exactly the same thing.
Yeah.
And if you want to know what who the sort of alphabet agencies are that are part of that complex, just look at all of the agencies that were censoring guys like Jay Bhattacharya, that was exposed by Elon Musk in the Twitter files. And it's Homeland Security, it's DOD, it's FBI, and the CIA never uses their own acronym, but it was the CIA too. So this is the same cast of characters that Chris and Abigail talk about. It has nothing to do with public health.
Yeah.
It's much bigger and more dangerous than that.
Much more evil.
Well, who was it that finally today or yesterday popped off with, well, we need to go into Ukraine to get the raw minerals.
Yeah.
You know?
That was Lindsey Graham,
Right.
that great hero of liberty.
Yeah. Finally.
Yeah, I'm being sarcastic in case
I
someone wants to
figured that.
clip that. Yeah, and say
I got that on my own
later. Yeah. Well, there was I don't know anything about this, but I remember much earlier reports that there were absolutely biolabs in Ukraine in addition to China. And I'm sort of fascinated by this, because the rationale for doing this wildly dangerous gain of function bioweapon research was to come up with a defense plan in case one of our worst enemies decided to attack us with a bioweapon. So naturally, we're doing it in Ukraine, right next to Russia, and we're doing it in China.
Yeah.
Riddle me that. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. Riddle me that, Batman. Yeah.
So, yeah, I have another question for you guys.
Sure.
Is kind of to jump off earlier as far as like the mentality of certain people that are receptive to our message. Because one thing that I found that you guys do that is so powerful, and whether it's a video about the GSR or it's all messaging. It's promoting freedom, right? And then, but you guys are a lot better than I know I am about humanizing everybody and interacting with people as an individual, and then kind of warmed them up to the message. So how is it that we can approach people that are somewhat receptive to libertarianism through the events of the last few years? Like what are a couple of things, depending on the type of person, that you'd recommend?
Well, I do think I want to talk about some of the projects we've actually done.
I was going to talk about All We Have. So a great example of reaching people that don't actually know that they're receptive to our messaging is a documentary that we did during lockdowns called All We Have. And it told the horrific story of a family in Brooklyn that had a bar restaurant called
Schnitzel House.
Schnitzel House. It was a family restaurant. And it tells the story of the struggles that they had keeping their business open and keeping their employees paid. But during this, their son, who was in his 20s at the time, started having grand mal seizures. And this started right before lockdowns happened. And he was scheduled to have a bunch of doctor appointments. And then his doctor appointments were canceled because New York decided that the only thing that mattered in health-wise was COVID. So he couldn't get his appointments. He ended up having more seizures and ended up dying because he could not get the healthcare that he needed. So we made this documentary. It's pretty brutal. I still cry, I think, when I watch it. And it got accepted into a couple different New York City film festivals, which is insane, right? Because this was just a diatribe against all of the evils that their government imposed on people. But we didn't bitch about the government. We didn't mention any politicians by name. We just told this story. So this film was admitted into very lefty film festivals, and in one of them actually won the best COVID film of the year,
It's a New York City film
in
festival.
a New York City film festival. So the answer to your question is always make it personal. If you can tell a story about someone that was harmed because of government interventions or regulations or anything like that, you can always persuade people that way rather than reciting facts and figures or just bitching about this politician or that politician. If you can tell a story, that will work so much better than anything else.
Another film we made, again, getting back to sort of these common sense values that on their face everyone agrees with, things like don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. We made another short documentary called Everyone is Welcome, which, if you said that in the abstract, it's so fundamentally American. It's so fundamentally common sense. Yeah, everyone is welcome. And it happened to be the tweet of a bartender, a bar owner in DC, who decided after actually a full year of trying to comply with the insane lockdown orders and mask mandates and eventually vaccine mandates coming from the DC government, he finally said enough is enough. And all he tweeted was, everyone is welcome. If you were here yesterday, you're welcome tomorrow.
Meaning that, so tomorrow was the day that the vaccine mandates were going into effect. So he basically said, I'm not checking your papers. If you were here yesterday, you're welcome to come tomorrow.
And the government, in the kind of efficiency that we have never seen from the District of Columbia ever, they shut him down. They took his business license. They took his liquor license. He suddenly, after over a decade of 100% clean bill of health, was getting health violations. And they tried to destroy him for questioning their authority. And we tell that story. It's again sort of a way to get people to reconsider what they thought in the abstract was probably not a bad idea. But when you personalize it, when you get to meet this guy and get to understand who he is, and realize that they tried to destroy him because he tweeted, everyone is welcome. I think that's a key part of this approach. And I mentioned this before, and I do think, I don't know what you guys think of RFK, but I think the reason RFK is getting traction and is probably poised to be one of the most performing third-party candidates since Ross Perot. We'll see if that happens. Maybe they find ways to push him off the ballot like they're constantly pushing us off the ballot. but you know, he talks about some fairly basic things. You know, the right to leave your home, the right to work, the right to decide what you do with your own body, the right to travel across state lines. And people, I think people forget in the haze of lockdowns what governors and other wannabe potentates were doing to us. Keep it as simple as possible. I've been geeking out with you guys about gain of function research, but we got to always figure out how to translate it into something that matters to people where they are, not where we want them to be.
That was a long answer. I hope it worked or helped.
No, absolutely. I appreciate it. You guys are just so fantastic about that. And that the work you guys have done so far is just gonna live on, you know, indefinitely and keep doing good things.
Thank you. So we may clip that out of the YouTube when it goes live and put that on our website as an advertisement. So thank you so much.
Yep.
Any other questions?
Yeah, I'm wondering if you guys are familiar with Sam Husseini's work at all.
I'm not sure.
So he sent me a DM on Twitter a little bit ago. I interviewed him last year, and so in preparation for these congressional hearings, he was telling me about this guy named Robert Gary, who's he is linking him to potential Ebola connections, and he believes there might have been gain of function shenanigans going on there. And
Wow.
I just DM'd you his post about it.
Okay.
I feel like it might be of interest to you in the series.
Cool. Gary was part of the hearings yesterday.
Yeah,
right?
I was sitting right behind him, and he was just I mean, by the Republicans, he was mostly just getting the crap beat out of him. He's infamous for the proximal origins paper, and all of these emails that have been FOIA'd show that this particular epidemiologist, who gets tens of millions of dollars in NIH funding, so he's captured, if not an actual employee of the government. In private, he was saying, this absolutely looks like a lab leak. Oh shit, this is going to be a big problem. 3 days later, he publishes this paper that says there's absolutely no way, no evidence, the science is settled. This was not a lab leak. This was not gain of function. And he gets away with it. Like, this is the thing that's frustrating. The bad guys in the story continue to say what they say, even though it's not even slightly credible on its face, because the government controls all the funding, because he will continue to be funded, and he will suffer no consequences unless we literally tear apart the paradigm that allows for whoever it is. We don't actually know what Fauci, like, supposedly Fauci's retired. I don't believe that. I think he still probably is pulling the strings on a lot of these decisions. But either way, you have to stop that system. Otherwise, and this is like Dr. Ebright said, this is an existential event, because if you do gain of function on Ebola, I forget what the mortality rate is of Ebola, but it's orders of magnitude higher than what COVID was, and you weaponize it so that it's wildly infectious. This is a catastrophic event that none of us can even comprehend, and it's all funded by government, and it's all this government hubris, and it's this arrogance to think that they can reorganize society from the top down. But I don't feel like you have to be a libertarian to say we should never, ever, ever allow that to happen.
All right, we need something happier than that.
Other questions, or I want to talk about some of the other cool projects we're working on. And then if Sid's still around, I'd love to get an update on what's going on.
He had to leave.
He has to go
Yeah,
become senator.
something like that.
Yeah, United States Senator.
Yeah.
Anyone on the call, if you guys have a question for Matt and Terry, now would be good. Okay, well, we're all ears.
I was just going to say, this reminds me, way back, I was going through the interview process to get global entry. And it was such an annoying interview that I had to go through. And I had to watch this government made video explaining global entry to me and how awesome the TSA was and customs and immigration. And at the end of it, they asked me if I had any questions about the program. And I said no. And the response was, well, you must not be very interested in becoming part of this program. And I responded very sarcastically, oh no, I had so many questions, but this video I just watched was so amazing. It answered all of them. And they thought I was serious.
So we've answered all of
So we've answered all of their questions.
Okay, a final project. Terry wants to end on something happy. I want to. I'm going to have her talk about it mostly because she's better at this than I am. But we're about to release a project that we've been working on for several years called The Free Life, and I'll preface it before Terry describes it by just saying we're pretty good as libertarians at raging against the machine and complaining about what government does to people and pointing to the outrages and injustices and even atrocities that happen when government does the stupid things that it does. We struggle, I think, more, and this gets to some of the earlier comments. We struggle to talk in a way that's compelling about the beautiful things that happen when people are free to create and cooperate and just be left alone. And I think that is part of the equation we have to solve, which led us to this project, The Free Life, and maybe talk about how we met Carlos and
Sure.
and all that.
So we had this idea a couple of years ago. It was actually presented to us by some friends that are from Venezuela and Cuba, right?
Yeah, Gloria Alvarez and
Antonella Marty. Anyway, two amazing libertarians from South America. And we were talking about Miami and how it's such a melting pot of immigrants from Latin America. I mean, when everyone thinks about it, Miami, they think about the Cubans, but there's everyone there. And so we had this idea of doing a series of short films about various immigrants from various countries who have come to the United States searching for their freedom, right? And that can mean a lot of different things to a lot of different people. It can be escaping from communism. It can be escaping from one of the incredibly violent countries that's dealing with, gangs and drug trade. It can be
drug wars.
It can be a gay kid from Mexico City that's afraid he's going to get thrown off of a roof. I mean, all sorts of things. So while we were talking about this and looking for subjects, we met with a supporter of ours in Atlanta and told him about this vision. And he said, oh, I have a great idea for a subject for you. He said, my son is friends with the son of a Cuban artist that lives in Miami. He'd be great. His name is Carlos Luna. And my initial thought was, wow, I don't know about this. This seems like really tenuous and who knows. So I started researching Carlos and found his art, and his art is truly amazing. It's kind of abstract. He has depictions of women. He also has depictions of Castro's head being cut off. So all sorts of things. So we eventually connected with Carlos, and he started telling us his story, and it turned out to be so incredible. And he is such an amazing person. When he was always drawing as a kid, and when he was 13 years old, his grandmother told him, you're going to have to leave Cuba if you want to become the artist that I know that you can be. And then he was in high school in art class, and he did a series of drawings of the Cuban poet Jose Marti, who is incredibly famous in Cuba. Castro is not a fan. And his high school art teacher warned him that he had to be careful, that he was on the edge, I think is the phrase, that people were watching him. So he eventually left Cuba when he was 20, moved to Mexico, lived in Mexico for about 20 years, met his amazing wife, Claudia, and then eventually came to the realization that if he wanted to be the artist that he knew that he could be, he really needed to go to the United States. So he moved to Miami, and he is such an amazing depiction of what can happen when you are left alone and free to create. And he tells his story in such an amazing, positive, happy way that you can't be excited about being an American, right? And he even says, and it's true, I mean, of course the United States has problems, but there's no other country still that is as free as you can be. And as a result of this documentary, he's kind of become a minor celebrity in the libertarian free market space in Central and South America. He spoke in Puebla, at this festival called the Ideas Festival that's just huge in Mexico. And ironically, next week, Matt and I are flying down to Miami to be part of a documentary that is being made about him by a group in Mexico City. And what this documentary that they're filming is about is like his path to becoming vocal as a freedom fighter and vocal against Castro and becoming this minor celebrity. And it's kind of cool because it's basically because of us, because we gave him this voice through this documentary. It's just a great, happy story. I'll send the private link to Dave and he can share it with you all if you want to watch it, since it's not released yet.
So we've been going to film festivals, and Carlos has discovered his voice. Like I don't think he would have ever have known what a libertarian was, except that he was one. But he practiced it in his life, and we thought it would be interesting, like when you're trying to convince young people, even like third generation American Latinos, that what AOC is selling is a bill of goods. We talk about economics and healthcare and inflation and supply chains and all this stuff, and their eyes glaze over. They don't care. They don't believe it. But when you tell the story of an artist who wasn't allowed to create under a socialist regime, and artistic integrity and artistic freedom, not just economics, we thought it'd be a compelling way to reach people that wouldn't otherwise respond to our message, because his art is beautiful. He has a beautiful way of telling stories, even though English is his second language. His stuff shows with Picasso, so he is a rock star artist, and along the way he has become an evangelist for liberty in Latin America. So it's a very cool story, and we're sometime very soon we're going to release this publicly. So it's very different than the cover-up stuff because it's inspirational, it's emotional. If you don't get a little choked up, we won't have done our jobs, but I think you will, because it's a beautiful story. It's a hero's journey about facing impossible odds, paying the price, and then creating something so profoundly beautiful.
Yeah, we did a really cool event. So we don't do that many events at Free the People because we're too busy making films, but we wanted to do something really cool with this film. So we showed it in December during Art Basel. So Art Basel is a huge thing in Miami. So we rented a great venue and showed it and kind of advertised it to the people that were coming to Art Basel and the Miami community. And I was so nervous leading up to this event because we don't have a strong presence in Miami. And so we were relying on networks of people to email and invite. And at first I thought we weren't going to have anyone there. And then I was worried because we were actually way over capacity, which meant that we ended up with just the right amount of people there. It was a packed full house, standing room only. And at the beginning of the night, besides our crew, I think we knew 5 people there. So we had reached an entirely different audience. And that's always been our goal. And the best couple that we talked to that night had just moved to Florida from Massachusetts or New York, one of the horrible lockdown states, because they were so tired of the lockdowns. They weren't necessarily conservative or libertarian. They just were fed up with government. They were at an art gallery and just talking to the owner of the gallery, and the gallery owner said, "Oh, if you're looking for something to do tonight, I've heard there's this really cool film premiere." So it was just a really cool way that we got this film out there to an audience that had never heard of Free the People before and probably didn't even know what the word libertarian was. But they are left
and
fans.
probably self-identified as pretty left.
Probably.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so that again, back to like, how do you reach audiences? I think I would love to do more hero's journey type stories, showing people to succeed and win. And it could be like, we all have an infinite number of these stories to tell. We're better at yelling about government, and I'm guilty of this as much as anybody, but check out the Free Life, and we'll make sure to send it around.
Well, and I mean, a hero's journey in some ways, the big board story that we talked about earlier, the owner, a guy named Eric Flannery, his is a hero's journey story too. I mean, he fought the government. He was able to get his business reopened, mainly because we introduced him to a friend of ours, a lawyer called named Robert Alt. And Robert is the president of an organization called the Buckeye Institute based in Ohio. But they have a legal center within Buckeye where they take on various cases within our space. And Robert took on Eric's case and represented him through the ridiculousness of DC and getting all of his licensing back. But more importantly, he is now suing on Eric's behalf. Eric is now suing the DC government in federal court for various constitutional violations. He was shut down while the courts were closed. So Eric had no way to go and petition the courts and get his case heard. So it's a hero's journey. And hopefully when he wins, it's designed to make sure the government can't do this stuff again.
We've babbled for too long.
Well,
we sure appreciate your time. And, you know, we'll do everything we can here locally to make sure people know about you guys. I can tell you personally, I sure enjoy the content. I enjoy interacting with you guys when we do in person.
absolutely. Terry and your sidekick, Matt. and I almost got out some lard and did a Matt
Oh, there
test.
you
it's long enough. But no, you guys have been absolutely incredible. Thank you very, very much for joining us. Kibbe on Liberty, you guys have just done a wonderful job for us tonight, and we do indeed thank you. This will be
Great.
up on YouTube in the next couple of days, and
Thank you.
I am very glad we did not get an unwelcome visitor tonight. Thank you again.
So, Dave, we should make sure that any links that they want are loaded in the more info on the YouTube
Oh,
upload.
that would be great.
I'm sorry, what? Make
We
sure
should
what?
get any of the links that they would like us to link to on YouTube in the more info section, so
Okay.
people can
I will do
see
so.
about this
Yep.
project.
Yep. I will
Great,
do so.
thank you. We'll send those over to you, Dave, too.
I
That'd be
think that
great.
all gets saved, but I'm going to copy it before I go away. And let me stop the recording.